If you were able to stick around for this third presentation, I really appreciate it. And thank you so much. As we give people another minute to join, if you're comfortable doing so, please tell us about a time you identified with a character in a book you read for school. Yeah, thanks, Sahava. And I think the fact that the first book you bring up is one that you were not assigned is interesting. For me, I don't think it would come to anyone's surprise that as a white boy, I had quite a few texts that I could really easily identify. But we know that a lot of people are not necessarily able to identify with a lot of the books that they read as kids. And I think that really gets at the point of our discussion today, right? And our work, for those of you that are working in curriculum, rigor and representation, and the way that we want to create change in curriculum, right? So my name is William Rodick. I am the Spencer Scholar for P12 Practice at EdTrust National. My work at EdTrust is really focused on representation in curriculum, what it looks like, and how we can push for practical change. For us on the P12 practice team where I work, led by my colleague, Dr. Marshall, that has meant developing a tool for really digging into and understanding what it means for individuals and cultures to be represented in text and stories. It has also meant working closely with a variety of experts in representation, in curriculum rigor, and with publishers, which for us, that's our target audience. This is a group whose practices we're really hoping to change with our curriculum work. And it's a group that we're able to really work closely with as partners. The curriculum representation work of ours touches on a few ARE dimensions outlined here, and it's most directly focused on ensuring kids have empowering, rigorous content. And there's a key question within the ARE dimension on content that mirrors the questions that are guiding our representation work. Does each student have access to high quality and culturally relevant curriculum and instructional materials? Like Marissa mentioned early on, there are great resources in the ARE toolkits that you should check out. There are diagnostics, advocate guides, meeting agendas, and guidebooks for action. And today I'm going to focus on the guidebooks because they align so closely to our P12 practice curriculum work. The guidebooks suggest that advocates begin by getting everyone together so they can work through the root causes of issues, by the potential actions that can come from understanding root causes, and the next steps that advocates can take. So I will talk about each of these steps in the process and focus on the lessons that we've learned in our work around building a community framework, understanding our context, collecting evidence, and determining the next best actions to take. Now, as I talk, you'll see the relevant section of the guidebook in the corner of each slide as we go. And I'm going to try to make this a little larger because I was told that it might be difficult to see. Hopefully that helps. So the guidebook recommends that you engage the people who know your context best. And if your focus is on curriculum change, that might mean teachers, that might mean other advocacy organizations, But at the earliest stages, you should consider people and groups that aren't necessarily the first ones you think of. In our work reviewing text, the P12 practice team tested our tool by reviewing books together. And someone would always say, wow, I had not thought of it that way, right? We want diverse perspectives in curricula, and we benefit from having them on our teams. You might ask, who are our student populations, and are they represented in our group? And that can give you an idea of the perspectives that you need to include. Community can include the people you're hoping to influence, maybe State Board of Education members, superintendents, school leaders. For the P12 practice team, our focus is national, and knowing that teachers and families are already really overburdened supplementing curriculum, we decided to go a little higher upstream to work directly with curriculum publishers. And by including them, we got a better understanding of their limitations and their needs, like tools and expertise that they don't necessarily have. So now we're not just an external voice telling publishers to make changes, we're looking through materials with them, empowering them to make changes themselves. And we know that language is powerful. We see CRT, for example, being co-opted and manipulated. But even when we're talking to people with similar goals, we all have different definitions for terms. But if terms can be defined early and can be grounded on the effects that we hope to have on students, they can be used to set the intentions of the many people that you bring together for advocacy. So to give an example from our curriculum work, something we heard a lot, even from other equity organizations, would be better representation is great, but not at the expense of quality. There was this assumption that representation meant a loss to quality. So to get past that assumption, we set a baseline understanding by discussing representation as an aspect of quality. And that link strengthened when we ground that meaning on the effect on students. So we often say that our goals are for students to be both engaged and challenged. We found that publishers were hesitant at first, and by additionally bringing in the word balance to our discussions, we could define the problem we saw and the solutions in ways that help them remain invested. Curriculum has always been representative, but the overrepresentation of whiteness can only really be addressed if we identify it, name it, and understand it, which we can accomplish without censoring or erasing text. These are some of the things that publishers have been fearful of in our first discussions. Once you have your team together, the guidebook recommends you understand your context by exploring the root causes of curriculum changes. The best resources here are the people you bring together. They know what has been tried already. They know what has and has not gone well. And if you're struggling to gather this information, it might be time to think again about who else you need at the table. Understanding past successes or roadblocks help you determine strategy. And it also helps you identify the kind of evidence that you may need to better advocate for change. So what is the available evidence in your state or district? Are there metrics for curriculum quality already? Maybe your state conducts curriculum or equity audits. If there is evidence, does it fit with the language and intention setting you did early on? Consider outside sources as well. If you can identify the curriculum providers, they may have been reviewed by a third-party organization like Ed Reports, which looks at curriculum quality, or the Johns Hopkins Knowledge Map, which looks at knowledge domains. For the P12 practice curriculum work, we identified evidence of bias in curricula, the imbalance of representation in children's books, and the imbalance of representation in the publishing industry. But we also found that through talking with publishers and their needs, that we still needed additional evidence. So there are many potential actions in the guidebook, and I want to focus on two of them first because they're relevant to any group concerned with curriculum representation, and that's creating a team and evaluating your curricula. So this involves identifying a group that can work through reading and talking about books. Depending on your group goals, you may already have a subject area or a set of grades that you want to impact. And there are several tools that you can choose from that can help you. I've listed just a few here. Most tools have a rating system or score But what I want to emphasize is the value of discussion, of working through what you're seeing in books. And you might find that one tool doesn't quite do it all. So as a group, you should revisit your intentions and make sure you're collecting the kinds of evidence that supports them. So for the P12 practice work, we found that almost all of the tools had something valuable to us, but that we needed to adapt and pull from them so that we could guide publishers through really deep thinking about representation. So I'm going to share with you the criteria that form the basis of our tool. We used expert panels and analysis of existing tools in our development, and we adapted our criteria as we talked about what we were finding. At the highest level, we want to understand author and character identities. Now, this is often where the focus of published work, making curriculum more representative, kind of is and stays, which doesn't get at things like stereotyping or whitewashing. So we wanted to fill that gap too in our discussions with publishers. So we have them think about the degree to which characters from varied backgrounds are fully formed the way we expect characters to be. We have them think deeply about how groups, cultures are presented and how they are presented in, I think by making my slide larger, I hit some of it, sorry about that. We have them think about groups and cultures and even how they're presented in comparison to one another. We also have them think about the perspectives that drive discussions of social and historical topics and how those discussions are connected to the realities of student lives. The type of evidence that you uncover from your reviews can help you determine which pressures you should apply. I just want to highlight a few areas of advocacy focus that we've seen come up often through the P12 practice curriculum work. Now, the first push you may make is on vision alignment. You know, districts and schools often have missions that focus on engaging all students, but we see pressures to remove text from curricula and hide a lot of truth and facts and instruction. So if you are bringing these decision makers into your work, like we talked about earlier, then you can reinforce guiding values and vision alignment in that language setting process. Another valuable push can be for educator supports. Teachers often spend time creating resources to fill gaps in representation or quality. So supports can be in providing adequate supplements, but supports can also include bias training or feedback and coaching. Support can also include advocating for changes to broader systems of instruction, like hiring a more diverse workforce. One other important focus for advocacy is pushing states and districts to include representation in data systems. I mentioned earlier, it is rare for there to be data around representation, but districts can build that evidence into district report cards, and they can explain how their curriculum choices are related to equity as part of federal requirements. So hopefully you found that helpful, but we're going to switch gears and get into a far more interesting discussion of what some of this looks like in context. So I'm grateful to be joined by Ravido Rahman, who is an on-the-ground advocacy expert. She's done incredible work building a movement for racial equity in Williamson County, Tennessee. This is an area that has strong presence from groups like Moms for Liberty. And although she began her advocacy as a parent, she continues this work through the organization she co-founded, One Wilco, and with the Tennessee Coalition for Truth in Classrooms, which has just great resources for advocacy. So I just want to verify, is Ravida on the line? Do we have you here?
I'm not seeing Ravida on the attendee list.
Okay.
Would it be possible to send her a quick email? And I apologize to everyone for the hiccup.
Yeah, and I emailed her before we started. So I wonder if there is something that is making it difficult for her to join us. But if she's unable to join us, we can contact her again just in case. But if she's unable to join us, I do suggest that people take a look at what she's done, what's been covered by the news, and her work advocating for racial equity in her schools. She really began as a parent advocate who took umbrage with how slavery in particular was instructed in her school, her child's school. Her class took a field trip to a plantation, and the discussion of the plantation, it was really more like an amusement park event, as opposed to recognizing the atrocities of the location. But anyway, yeah, take a look at her work, take a look at onewilco.org, which is her organization. I'm curious if she's unable to join us, if anybody, any attendees have either questions about some of the things we've talked about, or maybe things that you've attempted to do in your advocacy work for changing representation in curriculum that you'd like to discuss or share or have questions about.
Yeah, and as people are thinking about that and maybe can chat us if they would like to speak up or to ask a question, I'd also like to ask William, we've had some really powerful examples internally about how applying the framework that you've talked about can really make us think differently about some of the texts that are used in curriculum. So there are some very common works of literature that some people may think of as representative because they check a couple of boxes for characters and what it means to really be looking at a character that has agency or what kind of stereotypes they're conveying. So I know that that's probably a different slide deck than this one, but I think it would be really vivid for our attendees to hear a little bit more about what it means to think about a truly representative curriculum.
Yeah. And I'll answer that by talking about where our work currently is. So recently we've been working with a set of 5 curriculum publishers who have been sharing texts with us. And then what we've done is we've applied these criteria to a reading of each one. And we're finding a lot of ways in which representation is not necessarily complexly thought about. And we know that there's been a trend in the publishing industry to think of increased representation as a reduction of white characters on the page. So there was a major shift to having fewer white characters, but more animals on pages, more texts that are included in curricula that show animal characters, which just from a superficial change doesn't really engage children in the way that we're hoping to. It doesn't invite them in the way that we're hoping to. But I'll talk through each of these criteria, which unlike, there are a lot of tools out there, as I shared before, but ours does quite a few things differently. First, most tools and most considerations by publishers on changing representation really do stick at that top level of who is on the page. With K through 2 books, it's really about what characters are drawn on the page. And even when there's more inclusion, there's something called the trope of the brown-skinned child, where we see more characters of color drawn on the page, but they're still kind of devoid of agency, or they're not integrated within culture. There are no other markers or practices present on the page, which is really a narrow effort to make change. So when we're even at that superficial level of identifying authors, illustrators, and the characters on the page and the characteristics that they hold, we're really looking at what is named and how people name themselves. And then we're also looking at congruence within the text. So another thing that we found is, although there's been a lot more representation in stories, a lot of these are still written by white authors. And there are a lot of stories still that are just old, that satisfy that effort at increasing representation. But beyond just who's on the page, we want to understand deeply about what their role on the page. So as I said before, when we're thinking about characters, we really want to see what they reflect on the page. Are they kind of background characters when they're from marginalized communities, or do we see a full representation of them? Are they described fully? Do we get an understanding of not just who they are, but how they think and how they as a character evolve over the course of the story, as we expect characters to do? Are they making decisions? And are those decisions actually affecting others? Are they affecting their own stories? Are they affecting the stories of others around them? And then that leads into an understanding of influence as well. So when we see characters on the page, how are they described? Are they included, but they're really situated in this negative role, antagonist? Or do we see them representing positivity and fullness, as we expect more protagonists to do? When we think about cultures, we're obviously looking at stereotypes, but not just stereotypes. There's a whole host of tropes that we're taking into consideration, right? All of these ways that culture and groups might be presented that would make a student who identifies with that group or culture, take a step back and wonder how they are being presented in the story. We're also thinking about how characters are situated within culture. So not just, is there a culture on the page, but when we're seeing characters and full representation, are they linked to culture? Assets, so extending from that idea of character and individual influence, how are groups portrayed? Are they positively or negatively portrayed? And what kind of role do they have in the larger story? And then getting out of kind of like the tropes of white saviorism, what are we thinking of when we see groups in relationship to each other? What is the bigger message that we're sending? And then topics was something that we definitely wanted to include because we wanted to get at issues of bias in how topics are presented. This is something that really is kind of secondary in some of the tools that we wanted to make a critical column in these three components, right? And that first is in just, are these topics discussed superficially? And the next is, if we're thinking about whose perspective is really guiding discussion of a topic, how does that link to the characters and the cultures that we're seeing presented in the story as well? And then finally, are they connected to structures? Like, I think one goal in education that I really wanted to advocate as a teacher myself is, are we making the lessons of instruction real for students? Are they able to see specific levers and connections from their lives, their realities, to the things that they're reading? Yeah. So that's quite a bit, but I actually am glad that I could dig into the tool a little bit more. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And when can we expect to see this tool come out?
So right now, like I said, we're applying the tool as part of our research. We're reviewing text, and we'll have a report coming out in the fall, September, October. And then after that, we'll be thinking about how we adapt this tool for broader audiences, because as I said through the presentation, we're really focused on changing upstream practices by curriculum publishers. And we're thinking about how this is directly applied to other groups, to teachers, to school leaders, to teacher prep programs, changing how teachers are instructed in teaching English. Okay. All right. Well, it is unfortunate that Ravida couldn't join us, but please do look her up. Do we have any other questions? If not, I think it's fine for us to wrap up here. Okay. I want to direct you to the end of my presentation here, which is a link to a survey. We hope you can take just 5 minutes to complete our feedback survey, which can be found at the link that has been added to the chat a few times. We really value your input, and we use our responses to improve our workshops and our events. Also, 4 respondents who complete the survey will be randomly selected to get a $25 Visa gift card. And thank you so much for joining us through all of our workshops today. It's been a pleasure having you. Thank you. I'm going to switch gears and get into a far more interesting discussion of what some of this looks like in context. I am so grateful to be joined by Ravido Rahman, who is an on-the-ground advocacy expert. She has done incredible work building a movement for racial equity in Williamson County, Tennessee, an area that has also has a strong presence from organizations like Moms for Liberty. And although she began her advocacy as a parent, she continues this work through the organization she co-founded, One Wilco, and with the Tennessee Coalition for Truth in Classrooms, which has incredible resources for advocacy. So welcome, Ravida.
I am so happy to be here, and thank you all for the opportunity, and thank you for all the work that you all are doing. So we definitely appreciate it. It's been very helpful for us.
Yeah, great. So there's a lot that you've been doing since you began your involvement in advocacy, but I think I'd like to just step back and ask what really sparked your initial involvement in curriculum change in your district?
You know, our first, we started this work back in 2017 after a couple of families went to a field trip at a local plantation for fun. And they started off talking about how this is how life was in the 1800s. But, you know, we all know that life for people that look like me wasn't like that. So that's our first introduction to how some of the education that our students are receiving is not truthful, is not forthcoming, giving them information. And so we just really wanted to see how we can try to, you know, change that. So me and about 5 other families got together with our principal, and they ended up bringing someone in from our central office district to talk to us about the curriculum and when certain things would be shared. You know, if these plantation field trips were educational, had an educational purpose. So that's really what kind of prompted our journey and our relationship with the superintendent at the time, who's no longer with us, and how we tried to say, hey, we've got a voice of families of color that are not being heard here. And we would love to make our district even better. So of course, you know, early 2018, we didn't have all the problems that we see today. So, you know, our district was looking forward to trying to do something to be inclusive. And one of the things that struck us was a lot of times when our students are learning, or all students are learning about history and the achievements of Black people and the different things that they're doing, a lot of that comes at points of trauma, whether it's slavery or these, you know, conflict that we saw during the civil rights movement. So we just wanted to make sure that, you know, there's a whole nother positive, uplifting side that we aren't hearing from. And we would love for our schools to be able to share those as well.
Yeah, that's great. And just thinking about this need to get curriculum beyond trauma, That's something that's come up in our work as well as we're reviewing text, and how many of them are really focused on these points of either the Civil War or slavery or the Civil Rights era, and not really in these other ways that we want to see characters represented on the pages. So I'm just curious about one of the things that we talked about earlier was defining, getting people together and defining language, setting your intentions. So can you talk a little bit about maybe how you kind of decided your goals and how to work towards them with the different people that you were working with?
Absolutely. Our we ended up having a large group of people who were at a point where they were wanting change. One Wilco started in October of 2020 after the country experienced our racial reckoning. And we had a lot of people that were just, that didn't know about this history, that didn't know about the treatment and wanted to learn more and wanted to be part of the solution instead of continuing to have that problem. So our purpose at One Wilco is we believe schools should be a welcoming place for where every child is supported for their full diverse potential. So we champion efforts with our district to make sure that all these different voices are being seen, to let them know what our goals are, whether that's the disproportionate rate of discipline for Black students that we are experiencing in our district, or whether that's the lack of teachers of color that we have. We have a low amount of diverse teachers. My son is in the 7th grade now, and at the school he's currently is, that's the first Black teacher that he's seen his whole time in this district. Well, let me back up. He saw one in 1st grade, but it wasn't his. She was in the building.
Yeah, wow. Oh my gosh.
Oh, it's just really hard. And, I think studies show that when we got diverse teachers, all kids benefit from that. And so we just wanted to try to pick up on some of these different things that we wanted to make sure our kids are learning. I talked about when we first started back in October, our co-founder, Jennifer Cortez, who's a white lady, just kind of reached out to me and said, hey, I'm really wanting to see what we can do to support and help families of color. And so that's when we decided that us coming together with my connection with the families of color and her connection with the white families and the allies, and what we can do within this diverse community to just have more sound to this voice, that we want every student in our district to feel welcome, to feel heard, to feel accepted, and how that can progress and make our district even better.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many aspects to this work. I mean, curriculum is just one part of all the change that can happen in a school and all the things that you're working on. So, and you talked about bringing parents together, right? So forming this community. And then what were kind of like the levers for change for your group within the school or the district?
I think once we ended up coming together and letting people know what our purpose is, we've built a lot of relationships with people in our community, whether that's the school board, the mayors, trying to have discussions with all these different people to let them know that we're not here to cause harm. We're here to make Williamson County a better place. And so those are some of the things that we have done. We have also pushed to have a diversity consultant come to our district and research the problems that we saw. During the pandemic, we had some students that created a Instagram page called Dearest WCS. And on that page, it was over 400 reports of disparities, bullying, racial issues, all kinds of things that students had voiced and shared that had gone unheard. So sometimes when students want to speak up, it takes courage to be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
Because we had a recent incident at the end of this last school year where a student was scratched out in the yearbook and called the N-word. And so she didn't want to say anything because she was fearful that she may lose her scholarship. And she's the victim, so she should not be experiencing that. So we had all these different racial incidents that really kind of galvanize the community behind us to say, hey, this is not what we want to see in our community, and we want to do something to stand out and be better.
Yeah, I think it's a really clear example that you pulled. And are there other ways that you all have used evidence, stories, these incidents to try to push for change within the school or district?
We do that a lot. I think the school board meetings has been a very good place for us to join as a community. We have our little One Wilco shirts and invite people to join us. We try to get people to share their stories during the public comment time. So with everything that our country has seen with school board meetings, we ended up having that time limited to a certain amount of time. So our last, I think that was May or March school board meeting, we had a student at one of our local high schools that a white student had put the N-word in his computer. And when he came back, he saw that. And so we kind of got, encouraged those students. We were so proud of them for standing up. They went and talked to their principal. They created change, which ended up changing the discipline policy at that school. And so that's something that we've been kind of advocating for, since 2018. So at the school board meeting, we're like, hey, I'm so proud of that principal for jumping out and making that change and listening to her students. But we've been talking to y'all since 2018, and y'all been giving us all these barrels and hurdles to cross. And this was something that she did easily. She made this change. So we felt very proud that at the last school board meeting, they implemented a policy of change. So we were successful in getting a diversity consultant hired so that our district can look at strategic plans from 5 to 7 years and things that we want to change and how we can do that. And so they surveyed voices, they did an equity audit, asked the community, teachers, staff to share, provide examples of things that they had experienced. We had teachers who had expressed that, hey, I've got all these credentials in education, and every time I turn around, somebody else is getting promoted ahead of me. And so all these different issues, compromise or compose what we're struggling with and dealing with, and how we can have a group to listen to those things and help us to try to create that change we want to see.
Yeah, that's great. And just thinking about student voice, it's such an important part of advocacy, but not something we see included all the time. How were you able to bring student voice, in these school board sessions or in any of your other work?
That has been a struggle that we've kind of encountered, and we hope to change that this year. I think our focus this year is more on those relationships with students. We've been building relationships with those in the community, but we were having a hard time when we would reach out to the school and say, hey, can you let us know who the president of the Black Student Alliance is, or the Latin American students? We were struggling getting them to communicate with us. So we, even Teacher Appreciation Day, we sent letters to all the schools to let them know, hey, we know that times are hard right now, that they're battling books, and, people are saying that teachers aren't doing certain things. We are a support system here. So now that we've built those relationships, it's been through, my sons are probably tired of me because I'm always like, are you going to the Black Student, Alliance meeting at your school? And I got to speak at one of the schools and share with them. And it was really interesting. We're having this big debate about CRT and all these different things. And when I was talking to those students, they, are like the rest of our country. They don't know what CRT is.
Yeah.
So just trying to build those relationships has been it's been a little bit of a struggle for us, but we are looking at doing different events. And so we're planning a social event for students, and we're going to try to send that to different students in the area to just let them know who we are, what we do, and how we are a support system for them. The Juneteenth holiday just passed, and we were able to have a tabling event with a booth and a table to let the community know who we are. So we hope to have this event, share and empower the students, and let them know how their voices are so important and how we are a resource to stand behind them and support them. And hopefully that will spread and allow other students, in our area to come out. So we're really looking forward to being more student-based this year and try to build more of those relationships.
Yeah, and that sounds like a great direct way to try and address that roadblock. And did you have other roadblocks that you had to get over, and kind of how did you navigate those? Maybe you still have some that you're facing now.
Oh, my screen went dark. Can you see me?
Oh, that's okay. I can still see you and hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Say that one more time. I'm sorry, I got a little distracted.
Oh, just wondering about some of the roadblocks you've either faced or maybe some that you still face, and what are your strategies for getting past them?
You know, one of the main roadblocks that we're kind of experiencing right now is financing and money. And we've seen how many of our other people who are sharing a different side and have political operatives, they are getting money poured into their organizations right now.
Yeah.
And so that's a challenge that we have. Another challenge that we have is we're in a red state, and our state has voted to make school board elections partisan, which is frustrating for us. It comes down to power and control. And so we are really trying to focus. Now, we are a 501c3, so we can't endorse candidates, but we have another group called Williamson Strong that is more on the advocacy with, you know, trying to get people in the right positions. We've tried to stay away from partisan. We have members of our community that are Republican as well as Democrat, and all focused on creating change for those students. So that's been a good thing. But one huge hurdle and roadblock that we're facing now with our district is we have one of the first anti-CRT suits that is looking to remove our wit and wisdom curriculum. And I had the opportunity of being able to participate in a book review as a parent and on one of those books called The River Between Us, which was a 5th grade book. And some of the things that I ended up reading in the lawsuit yesterday to prepare for today is just, you know, nonsense. You know, we're taking out Ruby Bridges and Dr. King and all these different things because we don't want to share, or I'm sorry, they don't want to share with all of us the truth and the things, and they want us to sugarcoat and focus on the lost cause narrative and continue to perpetuate these stories that are not true. And so or that are not telling the whole truth. And so we're really just trying to, you know, still continue to support our school district on that, and just be a positive voice in the room. And I think a lot of times when we are not present in that room, you know, that conversation can easily go another direction. So we're just trying to stay on task with that. So it is a struggle. We have quite a few roadblocks, but one thing that I really try to encourage our community is things happen. When we get a win, take it and run with it and be happy. But, you know, sometimes there's going to be some losses, and we got to, you know, get ourselves together, pat ourselves on the back, wipe the tears away, but come back ready to fight another day. And that's what we really want to make sure that our community is aware of.
Yeah, that is such a powerful message to leave with. So that's why I want to stop there, because it doesn't get said better than that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's so great to talk to you.
You as well. And I'm looking forward to our continued work together.
Yeah, thanks.